It's 10:01, and we'll call the subcommittee on the legislative audit on the finance committee to order. And just for the record, we have three members online: Representative Quam, Senator Zhang, and Senator Curran. And with that, Ms. Lyson, would you like to present your report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is Lori Lyson. I'm the Deputy Legislative Auditor for the Financial Audit Division. Today, we're going to present our performance audit on statewide overtime and shift bonus pay for a 2.5-year span of time. We focused on 5 agencies who paid the highest amount of overtime, and those 5 agencies also made up a majority of all statewide overtime paid. We last audited overtime in 2016. However, we're not following up on those prior audit findings because our scope this time is just slightly different. The scope of this audit is really looking at the eligibility and accuracy of overtime, shift bonus pay that occurred at 2 agencies, both the Department of Human Services and the Department of Corrections. And then we also did an analysis of the use of overtime at a treatment facility at the Department of Human Services and also at a correctional facility at the Department of Corrections. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Bionfall, who was the audit director on this audit. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lyson. And Mr. Bionfall, would you state your name for the record and continue, please?
Mr. Chair, committee members, my name is Jordan Bionfold, and I'm an audit director with the OLA. And today I'll be presenting the results of our audit of the statewide overtime and shift bonus pay. I'll start by giving a little background on overtime and shift bonus. The state does have many different employment agreements which govern the overtime requirements, and these requirements can vary depending on which employment agreement an employee is working under. In general, employees are eligible for overtime for hours worked in excess of their normal work period. This could be hours in excess of an 8-hour day, a 40-hour week, or an 80-hour pay period. Overtime is paid based on the number of hours worked, and then it can be paid either at straight time, which is the employee's regular hourly rate, or time and a half, which is their regular hourly rate times 1.5. Employees can receive payment for overtime either as money added to their paycheck, or they can receive compensatory time off, which is the equivalent of leave hours that they can take in subsequent pay periods. Shift bonuses are lump sum payments that are paid to employees for working eligible shifts, and these shift bonus payments are in addition to the employee's regular hours or regular pay or overtime pay for working that particular shift. The scope of our audit was from July 1st of 2022 through December 31st of 2024. During this 2.5-year period, the state as a whole spent about $15.7 billion on payroll. About 2% of this, or $367 million, was in overtime, and then about $37 million was paid as shift bonus payments. The objective of our audit was to determine if the departments tested complied with criteria related to overtime and shift bonus payments. And the 5 agencies we tested were the Department of Human Services, Department of Corrections, Department of Transportation, Department of Public Safety, and the Department of Natural Resources. These 5 agencies combined to pay about $300 million in overtime during our audit scope, and this was about 82% of the overall statewide overtime payments. And then additionally, 2 agencies within our audit scope, the Department of Human Services and the Department of Corrections, both paid shift bonuses totaling around $35 million, and this was about 94% of the overall statewide shift bonus payments. So as part of our audit, we looked at overtime earned by individual employees, and so this slide here presents the top 10 earning employees during our audit period, and you can see all of these employees earned more than $200,000 in overtime during this 2.5-year period. Across all state agencies, there were 219 employees who earned more than $100,000 in overtime during the audit scope, including 8 employees who earned more than $100,000 in a single fiscal year. Additionally, we looked at the number of hours these employees would be required to work in order to earn these sums of money. So this slide presents the number of hours worked by those same employees from the previous slide. Across all state agencies, there were 224 employees who worked more than 2,000 hours of overtime during our 2.5-year audit period, including 10 employees who worked more than 2,000 hours of overtime in a single fiscal year. And this would be the equivalent of one person working 2 full-time jobs. Overall, our audit conclusion was that all the agencies tested generally complied with the criteria we tested. We did have a total of 7 findings. 5 were related to overtime and compensatory time, and this was 1 finding per agency. And then we had 2 findings related to shift bonus payments. So findings 1 through 5 in the report are related to overtime payments, and we found that for all 5 departments, they did not always accurately pay overtime to employees. And we found that all 5 departments incorrectly paid overtime to some employees. Generally, we found that the incorrect calculations were relatively small. They affected a minimal number of employees. However, we did see some common themes across the audit. One of the consistent themes we saw was that employees did not correctly record their overtime during pay periods in which they had also used vacation or sick leave. And the employment agreements do vary in their requirements, and these drive whether or not the vacation and sick leave count towards earning overtime. And then another issue we found related to overtime was that some agencies did not always retain documentation to support the eligibility for overtime. And some employees are only eligible if they are assigned to work on a special project outside of their normal job duties. And for 2 of the agencies, we found that they did not always have documentation to support the reason for that overtime. Next, I'll talk about the 2 findings related to shift bonus payments. And so the Departments of Human Services and Corrections negotiated memorandums of understanding, or MOUs, with various labor unions. And then in January of 2022, they began offering shift incentive payments to employees to address staffing shortages. And these MOUs allowed the agencies to offer a wide variety of incentive payments, and they did require that the agencies develop a policy outlining the eligibility and parameters of the program they choose to implement, and then obtain approval from MMB for that specific program. For the Department of Human Services and in their Direct Care and Treatment Division, they implemented a shift bonus incentive program that would offer either $200 or $100 to employees for working an unfilled shift. And so the amount that an employee would be eligible for depended on which employment agreement that they were under. We have the 5 different applicable agreements listed on the slide. And then we also noted that some of these employees did receive a significant amount of shift bonus pay during our audit scope. And we highlighted 696 employees who did earn more than $10,000 in just shift bonus payments. And that ranged from $10,050 all the way up to $89,000. And these shift bonus payments are in addition to the regular payments or the overtime payments that they earned during this time period. And then I'll also note that these employees were eligible for the shift bonus whether they volunteered to work the overtime shift or whether they were required to work the shift. And so what we found in our finding was that DHS did not retain MMB's approval of the specifics of the program. And so as I mentioned on the previous slide, the MOUs allowed for a wide variety of different types of incentives. The agency chose to develop a program to offer specific shift bonus incentives, but they did not retain the approval from MMB to offer that specific program. And then additionally, we found that DHS did not establish an end date for the program. And so since these MOUs were negotiated under the 21 to 23 employment agreement, the program was only allowable until the end of that agreement or when the 23 to 25 agreement was enacted. And we found that DHS continued the program and paid about $6.6 million to employees after the program had expired. We do note in the report that DHS could have continued the program under the 23 to 25 employment agreements. However, if they wanted to continue, they would have needed to obtain additional approval from MMB to continue that program. Now we'll move on to finding 7 of the report. This is for the Department of Corrections. And similar to DHS, they entered into MOUs with the AFSCME agreement, and they developed a program that would pay a shift bonus to AFSCME employees who worked an overtime shift. And these employees were eligible for a $50 shift bonus if they picked up an overtime shift less than 4 hours, and a $100 shift bonus for an overtime shift of more than 4 hours. We noted that there were 172 employees at the Department of Corrections who received a significant amount of shift bonus pay, and this ranged from $10,050 up to $44,350. And so we did find similar issues at the Department of Corrections. The first bullet shows that the Department of Corrections did not retain support from MMB authorizing the specifics of the shift bonus program that they implemented. We found that the Department of Corrections paid $13,000 to employees after the program had ended. And then the department paid $1,100 to 4 employees who were not employed under the AFSCME agreement, and so these employees were not eligible to receive the shift bonus. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Representative Jacobs.
Thank you, Chair Barr. So just wondering, was this strictly sloppy management, or did you see anything where it was intentionally fraudulent, the claims that were made to accrue $6.6 million? Jordan.
Mr. Chair and
Sorry,
members.
Mr. Bjornfeld.
We did not identify any fraudulent payments. In terms of the shift bonus, it did appear to be a documentation issue related to the department did not retain the documentation, and then I think there was some misunderstanding in reading the employment agreements on the department thought they had the authorization to continue the program. However, upon reading the employment agreements, we believe they should have obtained the approval to continue after the 23 to 25 agreements were enacted.
Follow-up question.
Follow-up?
And with the length of the shifts, either they got a $100 bonus for up to 4 hours and then $200 beyond 4 hours. Did you look into, was there any abuse of claiming the 4-hour bonus but only working 5 minutes, or claiming the 8 hours but only working 4 hours and 5 minutes? Did you see any pattern there or any intentional abuse? The rest of your first answer looks like more sloppy management than intentional abuse.
Mr. Bjornfeld?
Mr. Chair, Representative Jacob, we did not identify any fraudulent activity. We did not go into that level of detail in our testing. The shift bonus payments did follow the same procedures as any other type of payroll in the state. The employees would document when they worked the shift bonus on their timesheets, and then their supervisor would approve their timesheets. But we did not identify any fraud related to these shift bonus payments.
Follow-up?
One last question. And so of the 6.6 million, and I was surprised that it came to that large of a number, where did they say, the departments, where did they say that their authority came from to go beyond when the contract, when the programs were expired? Where did they say their authority to spend the extra 6.6 million, where did they say that came from?
Mr. Bjornfeld?
Mr. Chair and Representative Jacob, I would point to Exhibit 15 in the report on page 30 and 31. And so what we did here is we listed the provisions within the MOU that allowed for these incentive payments, and then we listed any language that allowed for these under the 23 to 25 employment agreements. And so you can see for the bulk of the 6.6 million was from AFSCME. That was about 6.2 million. That has very broad language allowing agencies to create a shift bonus program with the approval from MMB. And so I think that was the agency saw that language, thought they had the authority to continue the program. However, they did not have the documented approval from MMB to continue that program.
That answers my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We have two more members that have signed in online, Representative Hansen and Senator Dibble. Let the record show that. And Representative Hansen, you have a question? Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my question relates a little bit differently on authority. It's more on source of funds. Does the auditor know, or did you look at, are these appropriated general funds that the commissioners have the authority to spend in those various programs, or are they dedicated funds that have the same authority? Are you seeing any pattern or shifting between dedicated and general funds? And then I have a follow-up.
Mr. Bjornfeld?
Mr. Chair, Representative Hansen, we did not specifically look at the funding sources of these shift bonus payments. We do have a footnote on page 36 related to the Department of Corrections. So the Department of Corrections did initially use federal funding to fund these shift bonus payments, and then later moved into their general fund appropriation. We did not do any work on the funding for DHS. I would defer that question to the agency.
Representative Hansen?
Thank you. I'm looking specifically relating to DNR with DNR enforcement because I believe we had done appropriations for special circumstance overtime, but we also have Game and Fish Fund and other dedicated dollars, which I believe the conservation officers can utilize. Did you parse that out at all, or is there any? Do you have the details on where dollars came from, particularly with DNR?
Mr. Bjornfeld?
Mr. Chair and Representative Hansen, we do not have that data in the report. We could We could look at that data and get that to you at a later time, though.
Representative Hanson?
That would be great.
follow-up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Quam?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How many of the hours were remote?
Mr. Bionfald?
Mr. Chair, Representative Quam, that was not a part of our audit scope, so I could not tell you that.
Representative Quam?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So basically, it was one bucket. You don't have any clarifying information or details that could help understand where they had a need for overtime. And, you know, was it a poor allocation of workers, not enough here, extra people here that they could have reallocated and avoided the overtime?
Mr. Bionfald? Or Ms. Lyson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative Quam. So I think where you'll see some of those larger users of overtime really came from positions of like direct care at the correctional facilities where there's officers. And historically, they've had issues in fulfilling their shifts. And I'm going to try to figure out what page it's on. But what Jordan and Mr. Bionfald and the team did is they did overtime use at the Anoka Metro Regional Treatment Center and then at the Stillwater Correctional Facility. And that's on pages 12 of the report through approximately page 15. And then it shows what they were expecting their full-time equivalency to be, and then just how much they had to use overtime to just even fill those shifts, how they weren't able to consistently fill those shifts. Sometimes those shifts weren't filled because people were on leave, so they need to fill when people are on vacation or on sick leave. But so we did do a deeper dive there that you can look into.
Representative Quam?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And basically the focus, because I remember, I think a couple years ago, they were talking about closing some of the facilities that are part of the entity that had quite a bit of overtime. And I think when we look at a legislative budget, we need to use this type of data to analyze where there maybe needs to be an increase of personnel, and also look at possibility of where they're overstaffed, if we can shift some people around and do things more intelligently and be better stewards of the taxpayer dollars. And so I thank you for the data and the information, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions from the committee? Thank you. And with that, we should have some, let's see, Department of Corrections. Good morning. If you'd state your name for the record, please, and continue.
Good morning, Chair and members of the Commission. My name is Safia Khan, and I'm the Deputy Commissioner at the Department of Corrections. With me today is our CFO, Kwesi Pasley. Commissioner Schnell sends his regrets that he was unable to be here today. He is meeting with victim families ahead of today's parole hearings. I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify on the Office of Legislative Auditor's statewide overtime and shift bonus pay report. First, I want to acknowledge the work of the Legislative Auditor and their staff. We appreciate the OLA's thorough review of the agency and resulting recommendations, and the DOC accepts the findings. Since receiving the report and before that, we have taken corrective actions, including strengthening internal payroll controls, retraining supervisory staff, and formalizing approval pathways with MMB. As you all are aware, DOC faced considerable staffing challenges over the last several years, and overtime was and remains a tool we rely on heavily to maintain safe staffing levels inside our prisons. We are committed to transparency, accountability, and continuous improvement in this area. We appreciate the auditor's work and this committee's oversight as we continue strengthening our processes. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions from anyone on the committee? Well, with that, thank you. And next up, we have Department of Human Services. Thank you. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
I'm Connie Jones. I'm the Chief of Staff for the Direct Care and Treatment Agency. So the Minnesota Department of Human Services and the Minnesota Direct Care and Treatment agencies recognize that strong internal controls are essential for maintaining and protecting the integrity of complex payroll systems. This ensures that the agencies comply with the many overtime-related provisions contained in labor agreements and that payroll is accurately recorded, processed, and paid and documented. We're pleased that the audit found that DHS and DCT generally complied with overtime requirements and that the issues identified do not indicate a systemic problem with payroll. We acknowledge, however, that the audit also raised legitimate questions and legitimate concerns. We agree with the findings and will address the issues identified to ensure that overtime and bonuses are paid accurately in accordance with labor agreements. Thank you.
Any questions from the committee? Representative Jacobs.
Thank you, Chair Barr. Can you explain to me, in your department, how the new paid sick and family medical leave, how does that affect the overtime or request for overtime? Is it, just explain how that is affecting your overtime hours.
I'm sorry. I didn't write your name down.
Connie Jones.
Jones? Ms. Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. Are you referring to the new paid
Yes.
leave law that will go into effect in January?
Yeah, how do you expect that will affect this overtime program?
At this time, we are still working through the processes and how those requests will come in and how the process will go. I would have to get back to you on the exact details on what that will look like in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And with the different sites, could there be some balancing of personnel to decrease the overtime?
Ms. Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. At AMRTC, as indicated, there is 96 beds, an inpatient psychiatric hospital. So each location hires based upon the needs of the patients. At that particular location, there are really 9 nursing personnel needed on each site, each program area, in the day and the evening shifts, and 6 in the evenings. That can fluctuate, though, based upon the acuity of the patient needs. And in addition, with staff shortages, we need to at least meet the baseline. So that is where our overtime comes. So shifting within, we are at baseline across the whole system. And then based upon acuity, we need to raise those numbers at times.
Follow up. Senator Rust.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Jones, I note in page 46, the response from the department that it appears at least that some of the decisions that are made about overtime are complicated by the number of bargaining units with very specific requirements, agreements, memorandums of understanding. And I wonder, to what extent does the agency have difficulty in assigning proper overtime and so forth because of having to, the HR department having to go back to each bargaining unit's agreement and memorandums of understanding. And is there any possibility that some of those agreements could be more regularized between bargaining units, or are they so individualized that that is just really not a possibility in coming to terms with the various bargaining units and getting the contracts accepted and approved. Is this the animal that we're really going to have to deal with, or has the department been thinking about ways in which these bargaining unit agreements could be more streamlined and more regularized?
Ms. Jones?
Chair, members, thank you for that question. I'm going to break that up into a couple, if that's
Sure,
okay
thank
with
you.
you. So as far as the complexity of the contracts and plans when it comes to overtime, yes, you are correct. They are complex. As we separated into a new agency, we are putting training in place for all of our managers and supervisors, as well as our employees, on creating tools that are available to them to help them work through the process on the overtime provisions, and in fact, any provisions within the contracts when it comes to payroll. In addition, we are exploring the implementation of a time and attendance system, which really is an industry standard in healthcare systems when it comes to overtime. These systems will improve our payroll accuracy and may result in some savings when it's applying all of the contract provisions in the system, and will be that control mechanism that would be put in place. As far as the bargaining proposals, that I will defer to Minnesota Management and Budget, that, we do have that cycle every 2 years.
Mr. Chairman, thank you
Follow-up?
very much, Ms. Jones.
Nobody, just a quick question myself. How many bargaining units does HHS work with, or Human Services?
So, Chair, Representatives, at DCT, there are 5 bargaining units and 2 plans.
I'm sorry, 5 bargaining units and 2 what?
Plans, the manager's plan and commissioner's plan.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from members of the committee? No, thank you.
Thank you.
And we have direct care and treatment. Is that you?
Oh, yes.
You get to take care of that one too, or I think we got that all, unless anybody had any questions for that particular area, I think we've got that one covered then. Natural Resources is up next. Any, Bob Meyer? No?
Yes, right here.
Okay. Good morning. Please state your name for the record and continue.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members. For the record, Bob Meyer, Assistant Commissioner, Department of Natural Resources. I have with me today also Matt Olinger, our Director of Human Resources for the Natural Resources Department. Thank you for allowing us to be here, and thank you for the OLA for this work that they've done on this important topic. We value the Office of Legislative Auditor's recommendations for recovering identified overpayments and improving the accuracy and documentation of DNR's overtime payments into the future. We concur with both the finding and recommendations and have been working since we first became aware of the issues identified to understand the scope of the matter, initiate steps to ensure the accuracy of overtime payments in the future, and assess recovery options for all overtime payments confirmed as part of this audit report. As far as recommendation 1, we will create guidance and training to ensure employees and supervisors and managers understand overtime-related rules specific to the employment agreements applicable to their work and department expectations for compliance with those rules. Recommendation number 2, DNR's Human Resource Office will collect the overpayments related to the overtime identified in the audits, totaling $1,206 for DNR employees. We will also correct any overpayments for premium pay and other factors that may be pertinent to the overtime overpayments, but that were outside of the audit scope and thus not identified by the auditor. As for recommendation number 3, the DNR Human Resources Office will work with our internal audit section to examine internal processes and strengthen internal controls to ensure DNR is paying overtime in accordance with applicable employment agreements, state and federal law, and payroll policies and procedures. The estimated completion date for all corrective actions is March 1st, 2026. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Senator Rest.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Meyer. There is for these findings, there's randomly selected employees to as a way in which to get some sort of statistical significance. How many employees, however, does the DNR have? A total number, it doesn't have to be exact, but in the ballpark, that are eligible to receive overtime, or are they all covered by a contract of one kind or another that allows payment of overtime when it is necessary for the very same kind of reasons that Ms. Jones mentioned about when direct care is involved, and not like when Representative Quam was talking where there's remote work, which is very different than if you have to, in order to work, you have to go to work. And somebody has to be on the job in person rather than working remotely, which I think is a confounding kind of phenomenon when so many jobs can be maybe 100% done remotely, but some of the jobs in the DNR and in Human Services, they can't be done, and corrections, they can't be done remotely. So how many employees generally, is it all, is it half, that are eligible and have the opportunity to qualify for overtime?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Meyer.
Senator Rest, I'm going to start that question, and if we need more specifics, I'll turn it over to our
Okay,
Human
thank you
Resources.
very much, Mr. Chairman.
The Department of Natural Resources has approximately 2,400 FTEs, which equates to about 3,000 actual employees because a number of our field staff, our workforce, is part-time during the outdoor recreation peak seasons. All of those employees are at work out in the field. We are a field-based organization, so most of our employees, except for the administrative support and scientists and things like that, work in the field every day and have been all of their lives. So those folks, boots on the ground, they would be eligible for overtime as their contracts represent, and are also out there saving lives and structures. You think about the overtime that we supply related to forest fire or forestry firefighting work in the springtime, for example, or our enforcement officers, which is a separate, and that's dealt with in their contract, and the legislature appropriates overtime money directly for each officer through the budget process. So most of our employees that are on the ground are eligible either under AFSCME or other contracts for employment or for overtime, and we work with them and monitor that as diligently as possible.
Follow up?
So, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Meyer, so during the period right now, firearms hunting season for deer, which I support enormously, I have no fondness for deer at all. And I was glad to see that our hunters are being so successful in this time. But are those the kinds of folks that are enforcement officers with regard to particular seasonal activities? And I don't mean just in the parks, but for example, like hunting seasons for various species. Is that an issue that comes up that requires overtime in order to have a safe hunting season?
Mr. Meyer?
Mr. Chair, Senator Rest, great questions, and thank you for your support or lack thereof for the deer population. We're working on that diligently as we speak.
I hit one with a car, and with my car, and I lost all my fondness, Mr. Chairman, for Bambi.
Well, we're glad that you're safe. But that's a great example because chronic wasting disease testing that occurred this weekend, we had numerous staff, not only from the Fish and Wildlife Division, but from other divisions as well, working this weekend that were eligible for overtime unless they managed their work week a different way with their supervisor. But those types of things, any of the fishing opener, we have enforcement officers out making sure people are safe on all the openers and all the holidays. Our park staff, you just think about a 4th of July at any given state park, right? There are needs. We manage them. but also overtime is a critical tool that we need to make sure people are safe and our outdoor recreation system is functioning and it represents what people want.
Thank you, Mr.
Follow-up?
Meyer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Commissioner Meyer, I don't know if you were in the room when I asked the question earlier about, where the source of some of the funds come. And I believe we had provided appropriations for when DNR officers were involved in responding to civil unrest. And are some of the appropriations for that in the results of these of this audit? Is it something related to that appropriation, or is it across the board with other appropriations, particularly the game and fish?
Mr. Meyer?
Mr. Chair, Representative Hanson, you'll note on page 50 in our response, there were 2 of randomly selected samples that their overtime did not agree with the Minnesota Law Enforcement Association agreement, resulting in overpayment of $22. We take fund integrity very, very seriously. All of our accounts have statutory uses associated with them in statute. For example, game and fish fund dollars can only be used for game and fish management activities. What Representative Hanson is referring to, our work with the city of Minneapolis protecting the capital assets, number of times we've been pulled in recently, are all funded from the general fund, and we seek reimbursement. We cannot use dedicated accounts outside of their statutory responsibilities. I will also say that in the budget bill itself, and the biennial budget appropriations bill for the Natural Resources Department, there is language that appropriates overtime money for our officers. Our conservation officers are budgeted approximately 400 hours per officer per year through the statutory process, and it's also represented in the contract language as well. So there are some desperate needs we use our overtime for, especially managing our field staff of conservation officers, which has not increased since the 1950s. So we use overtime as a tool rather than more enforcement officers on the payroll.
Follow-up, Representative Hanson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. In the current biennium, do you anticipate needing additional authorization or appropriations for overtime?
Mr. Meyer?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Hanson, I guess that will depend on the situations that unfold between now and the end of the biennium. So currently at this point in time, there's a small number we're looking to recover from some of the unfortunate incidences over the summertime, but that will be dealt with through the budgetary process at the legislature.
Representative Hanson?
Thank you. That's all I have.
One quick question. You will recoup whatever we found as erroneous overtime payments, right? That's on the list. And then one other follow-up, or one other question I had. You mentioned your FTEs haven't increased, but I'm sure we have some extra needs. My question is, at what dollar cost? Because I know there's when you hire an FTE, there's a lot of like health insurance payments that go along with an FTE. At what point is it cost effective to add FTEs and lower overtime payments? Mr. Meyer?
Mr. Chairman, first of all, I should say, rather than just nod my head, yes, we will recover the costs that have been identified in the report. And that is an actual the management tool we use, right, trying to evaluate retirements, open or positions available, vacant, and how many new FTEs we have. The department hasn't taken on many new FTEs as we just try to maintain within our current complement. Enforcement, it's a realistic conversation we have every day as far as how many, can we afford new field stations, or what do we do actually? So I appreciate the interest.
Thank you. With that, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And next up is Bob Jacobson, Public Safety. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
Bob Jacobson, Commissioner of Public Safety. Good morning, everyone. As mentioned, I'm Bob Jacobson, and I have the honor of serving as the Commissioner of Public Safety for the state of Minnesota. I want to thank you for the opportunity to discuss the DPS finding from the OLA Statewide Overtime Pay Audit Report. I appreciate the work of the OLA, and DPS is committed to making improvements and complying with the OLA recommendations. In this report, the OLA found DPS generally complied with the criteria tested, but there were some overpayments and opportunities to strengthen internal controls. DPS has strengthened payroll procedures and developed a payroll checklist of payroll tasks and provided training to all timekeepers. DPS payroll also documents and tracks all payroll issues to ensure any overpayments are tracked through recovery of overpayments. DPS is also planning to develop training modules for all staff that approve timesheets in the state's training system. These modules will be customized based on those employee agreements. DPS is also committed to improving payroll systems and internal controls to ensure DPS is meeting our responsibility to compensate employees in compliance with state and federal law, employment agreements, and payroll policies and procedures. With that, my thanks, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Senator Rest?
Thank you very much, Commissioner. You mentioned procedures and trainings that are now ongoing or that have been created. Why weren't they in place, or what kind of training was in place before the involvement of the auditor with regard to overtime? Were there none? Were there assumptions? And who was doing the training and who was being trained?
Mr. Jacobson?
Mr. Chair, Senator Rest, thank you for that question. Certainly the training prior to this, was done in compliance with MMB rules and procedures, and certainly in working with our staff internally. I don't know the specifics of each training that was given to our staff, but certainly we have been working with these units and these overtime procedures and processes for a significant amount of time. My guess is that in some cases there needs to be reminders of how these payments should be processed. As was documented in one of the findings, one of the things that we did not catch is that employees who were working or who had taken time off, vacation, sick leave, what have you, during a pay period, and then worked overtime were paid at a time and a half rate where they should have been paid at a straight time. And so, sometimes it's a strong reminder on payroll processes and procedures. And, we also certainly want to make sure that our employees and staff are aware of that as well. And our many unions that we work with, just to make sure that we're all on the same page and to make sure that we all take responsibility for how our payroll processes are implemented.
Follow up?
So, Mr. Chairman and Commissioner, so would it be fair to say that with regard to these issues that the appropriate managers and employees are now on high alert with regard to making sure that they are paid for the work they do, but not overpaid for it?
Mr. Jacobson?
Mr. Chair, Senator Rest, I think I mentioned this the last time I was in front of this committee. I always enjoy being in front of this committee. But I also am always disappointed when we make a mistake. And I've shared this with the auditor as well, that we are committed, the old Vince Lombardi, quote, we will achieve excellence in the pursuit of perfection. Certainly will continue to apply to all the work that we do here at DPS. And it is my responsibility, and will always be my responsibility while I'm here, no matter what level of the organization, that we take those internal controls seriously, that we make sure that we pay appropriately. And in this case, we made some mistakes, and my apologies for that. But your comment about being on high alert, I think that is accurate, Senator Rest. And again, we will continue to strive to do better.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioner, I certainly appreciate your diligence and also the integrity of your department. Thank you so much.
Mr. Jacobson, kind of the same questions. You do have plans to recoup all the, any excess overtime payments that were made? And when do you plan on having that process completed and the overtime recouped? Mr. Jacobson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. We are in the process of working with our employees on recovery of those overpayments. I'm sure they will be taking place very soon. I don't have a specific timeline, but this isn't something that we'll wait on. But we also want to make sure that we are treating our employees with respect. And, depending on the amounts of recoupment, perhaps that could take over a couple of pay periods. But we will recoup all the money that was overpaid.
Thank you. And then just when you were talking about some of the vacation and overtime, is just so I can kind of clear this up in my own head, would that be if you had an 80-hour pay period, a 2-week pay, let's call it a 2-week pay period, they took vacation the first week but earned overtime the second week? Is that where some of that erroneous kind of stuff came up, where in the pay period there was vacation but they had overtime in part of it? Could you just explain that a little better so I understand it? Thank you. Mr. Jacobson.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, that's my understanding that most of our agreements and policies are that within that same pay period, if an employee or staff member takes vacation or sick leave or other leave time, and then they perform an overtime or additional duty during that same pay period, that they are not allowed to earn at a time-and-a-half rate. They're allowed to earn at a straight-time rate. And taking a look at the report, I saw that many of the payrolls review, we had 1 or sometimes 2 out of 60 employees for their overtime requests that were incorrect. Our belief is that most of the time that our team caught that. But again, during that same pay period, if they took vacation leave or sick leave, they would earn overtime at a straight time rate. I believe one of our contract agreements has now changed to where that is no longer the case, but we made mistakes during that specific period of time.
Thank you. No other questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And let's see, next on the list, the Department of Transportation, Ms. Sternberger. Hopefully I got that right. Daubenberger, I'm sorry. Please state your name for the record and continue. Thank you.
Thank you and good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Nancy Daubenberger, and I serve as the Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Transportation. MnDOT is grateful to the Office of the Legislative Auditor for the recent audit regarding statewide overtime and shift bonus pay and the opportunity to discuss with you and your team recently in the exit conference you provided us. We appreciate the independent review of MnDOT, the report, and we always value the opportunity to make improvements to our internal processes to ensure all employees are being compensated accurately. At MnDOT, overtime is a critical tool to deliver essential services for Minnesotans, such as on-time construction projects and 24/7 snow and ice operations. For the 2.5-year period that the team evaluated, MnDOT paid $30.9 million of overtime payments, $24.4 million of earned comp time, and that was totaling $55.3 million of total overtime and comp. And just to note, total payroll expenditures in that time period were $1.39 billion. MnDOT agrees with the OLA's findings, and we support the OLA recommendations. We are in the process of resolving the 3 specific overpayments and strengthening our internal controls to ensure payment of overtime is in accordance with state statutes and employee agreements. Our Office of Human Resources and the Office of Financial Management at MnDOT have been implementing improvements to our process in the last year and ahead of both learning of the OLA audit and receiving the draft report on findings. We're offering additional trainings for supervisors and developing reports to better monitor eligibility for overtime pay. And since November of 2024, 113 additional supervisors have attended payroll training, which includes overtime. And our Office of Financial Management has offered ad hoc trainings to offices and districts specifically on overtime. Our Office of Human Resources has updated clarification and requirements regarding exempt and non-exempt FLSA status, other employee time and hours of work detail, as well as the MnDOT requirements for assigning, approving, and reporting overtime. A communication and implementation plan is being developed for these updates, and we've been also sending proactive, timely email reminders to managers and supervisors regarding the approval of overtime worked. While we recognize we may not be able to completely solve for all or any kind of human error, we are committed to these improvements that reduce instances of incorrect payments and strengthening our processes to address incorrect payments if they do occur. We again appreciate the work and collaboration with our office on this and look forward to ongoing conversation in the future. I stand for questions.
Any questions from members of the committee? Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A lot of the farmers appreciate the overtime that MnDOT does because they have the planting and the harvest seasons where they have long days. You have the construction season, but you also have these, blizzard pops up and things like that. How does this period compare to previous years and chunks of time? And is there an idea of most of it's from, construction or, some of those of where you have to clear the roads and et cetera? Just give us a picture of how this 2-year period compares and what was the big hitters.
Ms. Daubenberger?
Mr. Chair, Representative Quam, thank you for that question. And just anecdotally looking over the last 2.5 years, when it comes to snow and ice operations, the last 2 winters were not harsh for snow and ice operations as far as the amount of snow we got. Now, our teams are still out there when conditions are such where there could be icy conditions. So that could, of course, generate the need for overtime as well. However, that previous snow and ice season, so when I look back 2.5 years, presumably half of that previous season, that was a very snowy season. So we'd have to pull a report to find out detail of how much was, say, snow and ice operations versus construction or program delivery. But we could get that detail if that's of interest.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make sure that if there was extra data that the audit didn't come up, because audit shows stuff. And in the response from an agency or department, if you've got, well, here's where the exact things were, these are causes. So we can understand that as a legislature and not focus on things that, like you say, may be explained by, events due to the weather, or there's some construction projects that I know have rain at the wrong times and you try to finish it up for the season. But I think when we look at this and the overtime, if we've got the data to understand the contributors, then that takes away a lot of the stuff and we can focus on the problem areas. Because, you obviously have a department that's got a lot of overtime in normal practice. But if we can find out what the problem areas and fix that, then we can use the resources to do the base job no matter what department it is. So yeah, if there was some information could pass on, I think that would be appreciated. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Daubenberger?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, certainly we can pull a more detailed report for that.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Well, with that, thank you for your time. And that wraps up our presentation. No further business before the committee. We stand adjourned.